Hey everyone, it's Dave here from Banner Badgers, and welcome to another Q&A. This time with the magnificent master crafter himself. This is Miles, everybody. I was going to say over there, but it's over there. Miles, everybody. There he is, Miles. How you doing, Miles?
I'm great, thank you.
Cool, good, good. Now, if you didn't know, Miles is from his own company that he's created called RUNE FABLE that makes these extraordinarily beautiful looking dice. We've actually met him a while ago at various conventions that happened here in the UK. And we tried to do it quite unsuccessfully, which is why we're back here today. We tried to do a proper interview at the UK Games Expo in Birmingham. That was back in, when was that? May? June?
June. Start June.
June? June? But the sound, the amount of people and the background noise was incredible. That's not a down thing. It's just poor technology couldn't erase the background noise. So what I said to Miles, and we've tried several times to arrange this and make this happen, is to say, well, we'll bring you on. We'll do a proper 1 hour dedicated interview rather than having 5 minutes at your stand. But we'll promote the stand, we'll promote conventions, we'll promote your dice, we'll promote your business, and we'll do all kinds of things like that. So, for those of you who are joining us live, if you have any questions, do let us know at any point, any time, whatever they may be. Now, I've said to Miles, do not let out your, the secret sauce, the magic that allows him to be a superstar as he is. That will not be happening. But he might be sharing some tips and tricks if you are dice creators or if you want to get into that kind of field. Whatever kind of board game, TTRPGs you're into, most of them, 99%, require dice. So that's where it all comes in. That's where it all comes together. Hopefully, that's enough of a bigger intro for you. Now, Miles has been up in Scotland. Are you well enough rested now? Oh, and by the way, everybody, Steve's here. But Miles, Miles, how is Scotland for you? How is the time away and doing things?
Yeah, the jet
brilliant.
lag must be terrible.
Yeah, no, the jet lag is heavy. But no, it was good. Did Tabletop Scotland, the event up there, and then went and saw some family up in Aberdeen and did a bit of camping in the way back and actually had some sun.
Cool, good. Now we've got a bunch of things we want to kick off, but we want to talk about the Scotland convention more because we talk a lot about conventions, UK Games Expo and Dragon Meet. So I'm going to let Steve control the cameras because I was just trying to push the buttons and they weren't working. But how was the Scotland? It's Scotland tabletop, isn't it?
Yeah, Tabletop Scotland. So it's an event that is getting bigger every year. It was my first one, but it was absolutely brilliant. I'd say it's one of the friendliest and sort of welcoming conventions I've actually been to. It was a really, really lovely sort of vibe for the whole event.
Cool. So how do you prepare for your conventions? Is it just like a mass amount of crafting and then you go, right, that's the stuff we're going to sell? Or do people might place pre-orders and say, look, I'm going to be in Scotland in 6 weeks' time. Tell me what you want, what colours you want.
So I'd say more of the former.
Okay.
So I sort of end up with. So obviously, I aim to be really planned ahead and do everything in weeks in advance, and then what actually happens is I have a mad sort of crunch month normally, desperately trying to sand and polish stuff, which is what consumes most of my time. But how I get things looking so shiny. But yeah, and then it's I do take sort of unfinished sets with me to the conventions, and I do like pre-orders and things there as well. Yeah.
Do you mentioned you take unfinished sets? So do you finish them while you're there?
I don't know. That would I think I would have a rough time if I had to do that. But mostly safety.
We've seen well, that's true. Yeah, we've seen miniature painters. Was it UK Games Expo, Steve? They had a bunch of painters in like these booths, and basically treated like, well, here's my unpainted mini that I've just bought somewhere. Give it to someone who has to sit there and paint it for you while you're watching, and then that costs you 10 quid. And then here's your painted mini, and you go, oh, well, I wanted blue boots. You painted them brown. and they just change it. Is it not like that? People go, well, I want this dice, make it now.
No. So I'll have like a stand with a set of unfinished dice. So they're like unsanded, unpolished, unpainted. And then basically with like a sort of 3 to 4 week basically pre-order on them. Essentially, I'll take them away, finish them for you, and paint the numbers whatever color you want. So it adds a
Cool.
little bit of a customization option where the ones that are already finished on my stand don't have it.
I'm just aware we're talking about the dice, but we haven't shown any pictures. What I'm going to do, I'll put a picture up on the screen, or maybe Steve can. I'm not sure. There we go. But that button worked. There we go. Who says we're not professional? So how talk us through this, because these look fantastic. So what's the how do you pick the colors first of all? Because I'm a big fan of I like high contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And look at some of the photos you sent over. We've got a bunch of photos to show everyone. High contrast colors between the dice numbers and the color of the dice, but also large fonts. And I don't find enough of the ones with the big fonts, just because I'm getting old, and you throw your dice on the table, they roll away. I don't want to keep picking them up and looking at them.
Yeah,
I want to be able
sure.
to say, oh look, I rolled a 6, or I got a nat 20. I want to be able to react straight away without having to do that. So how do you make sure your color theory or these come through okay?
So for me, it kind of depends on the design of the dice. Like for this one, so for my D6s and my D20s, I do my brand symbol as the highest number on the dice.
Yeah.
Because then when you roll that nat 20, or your 6 on your thing, your dice for Fireball or whatever board game you're playing, then it pops, and you can be like, yes, because it just pops out that bit more. For the other colours on the other numbers, I did try and go with a font that took up enough space that you can see it, but didn't detract too much from sort of the art inside. Because at the end of the day, that's why you're buying, artisan dice, is because they're also a piece of art. But it really just depends on like the theme. So like for these ones that you can see now, I wanted them to sort of. The idea was that I was going for a dark prism. So the idea of kind of splitting the light back into black, if you will.
Yeah.
And for that, the sort of golds and coppers stood out against every single colour that was within it.
I think one of the unique things, and it's shown in these photographs as well. One of the unique things that I liked about when I'm because we met at the conventions, walking past people's stands, and there are other dice crafters and other manufacturers there as well. Is your presentation of the dice? You use pieces of wood, you've carved out these holes, and they're prepped in, and it's just displayed really, really naturally, which is, with a plastic resin, kind of goes against each other, but it's the presentation of the item.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that I wanted people to be able to look at the individual sets and also pick them up. Because at the end of the day, what I always tell people is that because people, can come over and kind of treat them like you would jewelry in a like jeweler's shop, for example. And I'm like, no, please do handle them, pick them up, twirl them in the light, because dice are shown off best when they're rolling at the end of the day. And that's the whole point of them. So I always want people to pick them up, and it's like, worst case, I've got a microfiber cloth under the stall at all times, so I can just give them a rub down, offer some hand sanitizer if people want anything. But I want it so that it I try and capture organic shapes inside the dice. So like you can see here, the method that I use is called the Petri method, and it kind of evokes that feeling of like mushrooms and organic tendrils and stuff. So I want it to kind of, even though resin is a plastic, I want the display to look organic as well.
Yeah.
I love the fact that a lot of them look like. See, I'm a big fan of when you see like coloured water injected into just a basin of water, and it's like all the smoke effects, and they just bleed and move out, and to be able to capture that, I think it is lovely. I love what these do, and the fact that the colour maintains as well.
Yeah.
So how fast does this resin actually dry? Is this like we're seeing that this pink dice in front of us at the moment. You can see those droplets that kind of look like they're going up. Now in real terms, that dice is upside down and it's sinking. But how slow is that as a process that the resin takes to dry and form?
So the resin sort of soft cures, I do it overnight. So for the resin that I use, it's a minimum of sort of 12 hours. It depends on the temperature as well. But it's about 12 hours to go to like touch hard, and that's when things stop moving and I can take them out of the molds. So I'd say the ink probably stops after about 6 of those hours. Maybe 8.
So do you pre-cure it and then add the ink, or is it all going at the same time?
That depends on what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
So because I've sort of managed to figure out that I can make different effects with the ink dripping through by varying when I put that ink in and how much I put in. So if I want something to not go as far, then I can, like you just said, pre-cure the ink a little bit. Sorry, pre-cure the resin a bit, and sort of leave it an hour, 45 minutes or whatever before I put any inks in.
Hagley, who's watching live, just said the numbers do pop. Yes. Don't get me wrong. These photos are phenomenal, and they get you right into how close these are. But again, Steve and myself, we've seen these in person, and they are really, really, really nice.
Yeah, they are. In terms of duration, going from a concept on doing a dice to the finished product, and you said the polishing and sanding takes the longest time. How long is that?
So from start to finish, so that'd be me pouring the resin into the molds to then having a finished dice that I could sell. It's about 2 weeks minimum.
Okay.
So because after that sort of soft cure of the resin that I talked about, you then have to sort of leave it a minimum of a week. Again, it depends on the temperature until it's sort of fully hard and safe to sort of sell. Because I wouldn't want to sell anything that isn't fully cured.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the photography here. You've got blues, pinks, purples.
Yeah.
In a I don't know, like it looked like stars.
It's a galaxy.
It's the Apple wallpaper of the galaxies used to get.
Yeah, it's some really awesome sort of arcane shimmer pigments that I've got. If anyone wants to check them out, they're a company called Chromatic Castle. They're good friends of mine.
Right.
But they sell these wonderful sort of micro lab-made mica pigments. So so they're not being mined out of somewhere in Africa or whatever. And they just really help things come to life. I mean, this particular design I designed to look like, if anyone's seen any of the images coming out of the James Webb Space Telescope, the cosmic cliffs and the pillars of creation. It's a well-known sort of nebula. And some of those pigments just added that extra little bit of just making them look like a little star factory that you're holding in your hand.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really it is incredible. I never thought of it like that, but yeah, you gotta. Yeah, it's I suppose because you've got to. There's a certain amount of time involved. You know what the end result you're trying to get to, and you have to layer it in a way so that during the curing it's a. I'm fascinated now. It's quite.
Yeah,
It's,
I kind of do it all. I kind of do all
yeah.
the process of making the design backwards.
Yes, and it's like upside down and back to front. It's trying to what's the result, and it's all you don't know what you're going to get until you open it. So,
Yeah,
although
yeah,
you might do some test runs, when it goes right, you go right. Now I know what my ingredients list was. Do you just have to keep doing it again, and does it keep changing, or is it kind of more pick and mix?
it does change a little bit. So like the exact pattern of those drips that you see will change every time I do it. I do have a little recipe book that I keep for some of my designs. Some of them I don't keep at all because I want them to be a complete one-off.
Wow.
And, you know, it makes them that extra little bit special. If I'm not sure how I did it, then you know, no one else is.
Yeah. No one else is. Yeah.
But I keep like this design, the one that you just showed, is one of my sort of staples that I do keep on pre-order in the shop. So it's my Wild Space design, and I've got that to the point that I can repeat that. But even if I do, because I place essentially all those drips, I place little droplets of ink by hand in particular places. So even though it might be the same design as someone else's or bought that particular one, each individual dice, the patterns are completely unique.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what's great about doing it.
Is there any particular dice shape that's a nightmare to do? Because obviously you're using gravity to come in from one side. You know, the elongated D4s, for example, look like they're an absolute nightmare just to get in the mold.
Do you know what? They're actually the nicest one to do.
Really?
Yeah, because of the way I set my mold up. I don't know if you have a picture of one of them, but essentially, let's say that 8 is one of them. I'll have that 8 face at the top, for example, and it gives me a whole long face to play with. You can kind of see here, so it gives me a whole face to play with. And because it's so long, it means that I can really kind of go to town. Whereas some of the D12, for example, and the D20 especially, depending how much I've filled it, can be a bit of a nightmare occasionally with some designs, because I'm really limited on the amount of space I've got to actually get my hands or cocktail sticks or whatever in there.
Yeah. Is that how the dice mold works? You only generally see one face of the dice.
Yeah, the way I do mine, so I use a technique called cap molds for mine, which is essentially what it sounds like. You have the mold, and the cap of the mold basically has the it's normally the lowest number of the face that I go for.
I mean, I love this one. It just looks like flame.
It does.
Yeah, the way it's come out there. I think for that design, I was going for kind of like I was taking inspiration from like the Grand Canyons and stuff like that, and those sort of striated layers of yellows and oranges and earthy tones. But then that's the great thing, is that what I think something is doesn't necessarily mean what someone else does, and the person who picks them up makes them unique to them as well.
Yeah.
So the number effect here as well has got sort of a pearlescent style on it. What paints are you using to paint numbers on? Are you using micas in the paint?
So for this one, I am. So I think it is an acrylic with mica basically in it. They're called Arteza pearlescents. for most of my stuff, all the ones that have matte numbers, I actually use Vallejo
Okay.
model paints, because they have, great. As anyone that's painted minis would know, they have great pigment density and stuff. So
Yes,
they're
they do.
kind of perfect for doing this sort of thing. These look really great. They are difficult to work with, though, and they're a lot more. They behave a lot more like an oil paint. Because they're really thick and gloopy, and they don't necessarily water down particularly well either.
Right.
But for sort of if I think it'll look good on the design, then I'll go with it anyway.
Yeah, I noticed your RUNE FABLE logo as well. You wet blend that.
Yes, I do.
The red going into the yellow. That looks great. Where did that come from? Is that your own design?
It is, yeah. So it actually comes from a campaign world that I've been running as DM for. It must be. God, when did I start it? I bet I started it in my early 20s, so it must be going on like 12, 13 years now.
Right.
And it was a sort of long-running campaign world that I call the apparatus of Jakarin. So it's sort of a stylized A and a J combined together in a rune form, because my game was all about a sort of ancient technology and stuff like that.
It does look impressive, really impressive. And as Dave said earlier, that is the one thing. You see a lot of dice and you can't read the numbers. Metallic dice are particularly bad for that as well.
Yeah. No, it's kind of been a fortuitous thing, because those are the colours that I originally had with them, and I had for like my campaign logo that I gave like my session 0 to hand out to players and stuff. And it's just worked out really well that I've tweaked it and sort of upped the vibrancy of the colours a bit, and that combination of yellow to purple, yellow to magenta, so far adds contrast to pretty much every colour that I put it on.
It comes across as amazing. Again, I'm just looking at the photos, because the as you say, the right color choice can really make it pop, and it's down to it's all down to each individual person. We like what we like.
Yeah, and it also sorry.
No, I was going to say, have you found anything that sells more than others? Is there like the magic color combination that people like?
No. No, there really is. I mean, people. I'd say that people from like on social media and stuff always love sort of blues and purples.
Yes.
I think just because they are colours that we have pigments that really pop, and they're really vibrant and they stand out.
Yeah.
But in reality, like for selling stuff, absolutely any and every. Sometimes there's a colour, there's a dice set that I've made that I think is like one of the coolest I've ever made, and it maybe doesn't sell as well as something that I'm like, oh, I like this, but it's not my favourite.
Yeah.
Just in terms of colours I've used. So I do try and make things that are all sorts of different colours for that reason, because what I like isn't necessarily what someone else likes, and that's just part of art at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Then we have for everyone else who's for those of you watching live, if you have a question for Miles, do put question in or just pop something into chat so we can see it. We can put it on the screen. If you're one of the many who are watching this on YouTube, thank you very much for joining us. Again, if you have a question for Miles, whether it's for Miles, whether it's dice related or convention related, do put it in the comments below, and I can send those questions on to Miles, and hopefully we can give you the answer that you're looking for. Well done. So keep those questions.
So do you do commission pieces as well, or do you generally stick to doing your own styles?
Yeah, no, I do commission pieces. I have on my website that I have a commission page where you can either go for just I have a pick your own Petri, which is the method with the blobs, where you can just pick a few colours, and it's sort of like it's commissioning your own colours in that style. And then I also do have a sort of form where you can fill out with a more bespoke commission as well.
What about the custom logo? Can someone send you a custom logo to put on, or is that too difficult to create?
I can do that, yeah. So I do literally everything in house. So I design and 3D print my own masters with a resin printer. I then polish those, make silicone molds from them, and then do all the resin work after that. So I can do it. Obviously, it is a little bit pricier because it's a whole nother step in the process. But, you know, if someone wants something that's really unique, then that's absolutely something that can be done.
Do you have a particular favourite at the moment? What's your own personal favourite that you've done?
My personal favourite is actually the one that you had up before, that was the Dark Prism set. Because getting those colours to all stand out and be completely vibrant, it was the one that was the black resin with the colours through it.
Let's see if we can find it.
It'll be there somewhere.
It's it. I'll go backwards through the list. There we go. Boom, 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 boom. I like this one because I'm a big fan of the blues.
Yeah.
And high contrast, so the white really pops. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you like the fire?
I like the fire. Yeah.
That was that way. There we go. Boom.
Yeah.
I can imagine that playing a Vernus or something like that.
Yeah, I do really like. I use it's like a slate grey. And it just made, I don't know what it did about it, but it does kind of remind you of like volcanic rock.
Yeah.
And there's also like you've so to me it looks like living fire. And you've captured something organic in a frozen moment in time. That's what I like about it.
Yeah.
You know, you've captured that flickering flame in that instant. It's like a photograph. That has come out really well. I don't know what technique you've used to do that, but it actually looks like a flame inside of a dice.
Yeah, no, it's the same technique that I've used for the other stuff. It's just I think with that particular dice, it's a combination of putting the inks where I want them at a particular point to get them to drip through sort of. I'd say like most of it has gone like 70% of the way through the dice rather than all the way to the end. And then you've got where I've applied it really heavily, just that sort of, like you say, that sort of flame like licking up to the top.
Yeah.
That's
the photographer there has captured. Yeah, it's that photo would sell that set.
Oh no, I mean she was absolutely brilliant actually. If anyone wants to check her out, it's J Litton Creates on Instagram. I'll just double check that for you.
Yeah, go for it. I'll find you. See if I can find your dice.
Yeah,
I'm also
Creates. But Jade, I met them there, and she absolutely loved the dice, and came out with photos that are way better than I can take, and I've spent a long time trying to take photos of dice.
She's done an excellent job. This is also one of my favourite photos as well from the set that you sent. This is the one we used on the promo flyer as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my favourite set.
That one. That's nice. It's like as you say, like black obsidian with colour floating through it.
Yeah.
It's really nice. I mean, we look at the central number there, the central dice, but if you look over to the right, it looks like it's jet black and those dots of colour, and then you've got the RUNE FABLE logo there.
Yeah, it's kind of an optical illusion, really, because it's more of like a smoky black that I use, but when it's against that sort of, when it's against the colour, your eyes drawn towards the color rather than the background, so it makes the background seem darker than it is.
Yeah.
So what's your next big? We talked about this before we went live. What's your next big challenge for yourself? What's is it what's I don't know. Could you? Well, I've seen people put like like Warhammer skulls, flakes of gold, inject air bubbles. I don't know how you inject air bubbles into something that like dries over time. But what? How many things have you experimented with, and what have you still got to try?
I've tried quite a bit. So, I mean, there's loads of techniques that other people use. Like, you know, you can do liquid cores in dice. You can embed resin, like you say, resin skulls or other 3D printed objects. One of the things that I am trying, that is sort of the next step for me, is taking the sort of flowing ink method that I'm using and combining it with other techniques, and sort of taking it that step, essentially trying to push what I am known for further, and really trying to sort of push that boundary of what is technically possible for me to do. So like I've got a couple of prototypes. I don't have any pictures of them yet, unfortunately. Combining that method with a couple of other things, and they're looking really good. So I've ordered some stuff in, and hopefully in the near future for Dragon Meat. Actually, I'm really hoping to have a few sets that are really special.
We have a few Dragon Meat exclusives of some like new type of dice that no one's ever seen before. What I mean, I'm just trying to think of stuff that's small enough to fit in to a dice, because I mean the photographs make it look like, oh, they're so big and beautiful, but they're not. We're talking nearly, tiny. I mean, have you tried things like sand, grains of sand?
Yeah, so some of the first ones I did were I sort of made to look like a little, I guess, coral reef. I had like a little bed of sand, and then I used mica pigment, essentially dropped through the resin as it was curing to sort of get, I guess, clumps of pigmented resin at different points, so it looked like this sort of bobbly coral structure. That were really cool. I don't have any of them left, unfortunately, but they were really cool. I've erred away from using sand, to be honest, because although they would be perfectly balanced for sort of tabletop gaming, you do always get the question: are they balanced?
I was going to come to that because you put sand in on the one, which means the 6 will always come to the top on a D6. Get my weighted DM dice from you. That'd be fine. What about things like because light, if you have the clear resin, and I've got things like gem dice and all kinds of things, like clear plastic, light still passes through. So anything that can refract and break that light, like a clump of glass, for example, or a chip of crystal, does that work with you, or are you trying to create these? What are those mini gardens called? When you see those mini gardens?
Oh, terrariums.
That's what, like on a tiny scale. Because I've seen the latest photo you had. I think it's called Creek.
Yeah, Cryptic Creeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is beautiful. It's kind of like this gentle river, light blue, and these green, and you've placed it in the corners.
Yeah. So it's a liquid core as well in there that shimmers as it goes.
Wow. So take us through that. How tricky was that their idea, or was that your idea?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. It was so it's Hatchling Games, who are an absolutely wonderful games company that make TTRPGs for all ages,
cool.
and also really accessible stuff as well. But they wanted some liquid core dice for their game that's launching on Kickstarter on, I believe it's Wednesday actually.
Cool. Good plug. Go check them out.
It's called Cryptid Creeks. But they wanted some dice that looked like the creek, because that's sort of the central theme of the journey and the game. So they wanted a liquid core, so we were working on that. And obviously, because I mean, I paint minis and stuff myself, and I was like, do you know what could look really cool here is some like model, like lichen for basing models and stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's got that very frond-like seaweed structure to it.
Yeah.
And we gave it a go, and it's come out really, really nice.
They look stunning. Again, go to runefable.com. You scroll down the page and or go to the Instagram, but the Instagram feed is on the webpage as well. It's on the left-hand side near the top. The dice are gorgeous. They look really, really. It's just again clever, because you actually have to think about, as we were talking earlier, how you construct something. You know the size and shape. That's your restriction, and you have to see it before you do it, test it, rerun it. We do have a question coming. Another question from Hagley. I have a question before that. Now, what happens on Wednesday and the Kickstarter? In 4 weeks' time, they go, right, Mars, we've got a slight problem. We sold 1 million copies. Now, that's not a bad problem to have. But are you doing sets for every single copy? Or is it just a special promo?
It's an add-on that's available during the campaign. They may be available afterwards, but for now it's just through the Kickstarter. I have been working with Rich and Catherine, who run Hatchling Games for a while, and we're sort of looking at estimating, like, I can happily do sort of 1,000 dice, definitely. But we're I've sort of been working to get set up to be able to support these kind of projects as well. So that's something that has taken a bit of time and practice, but it's great fun.
I was just putting it through to the idea of Dispel Dice.
Sure.
So Dispel Dice said, okay, here's some dice, and we'll put a Kickstarter up if anyone wants them, and then suddenly, multi-millions later. Yeah, we're gonna have a problem doing this, and suddenly there you are. Now you're an owner of a factory. Doing this again, not a bad problem to have.
No, but it personally, I think it would take a. That's not something I'd do. I think it'd take away from them being that bespoke, handmade feel.
Yeah, you've got
now,
to lose the artisan, then, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there will be a certain limitation to the amount that there are available. During that, there might be other runs in the future. But yeah, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that they are all remaining handmade and artisan, and that means limiting the number that I can happily do. I mean, hopefully in the future, talking things that what am I looking forward to in the future?
Yeah.
It would be great to take someone another person on, maybe, and sort of train them up to do exactly what I'm doing. But I wouldn't want to have.
Would you take someone on? Or would you take someone on? Would you do like a collaboration?
To be honest, both. I have a really lovely relationship with a few other dice makers in the UK, and a couple of them I've already spoken to about if something goes massive, would you want to work together on something? And so keeping it all bespoke and made by hand, just having 2 or 3 of us doing it.
Yeah. It's a nice way to do it. I do like that. But again, we've seen with the gaming community pulled together like you've never seen before.
Yeah.
Where everyone seems to back each other up, which is great. Hagley's question, if I can find it. Here we go. This is going back to the liquid core. How do you keep the core liquid?
So it's a really cool technique. I certainly didn't come up with it, but basically it's little glass globes, and you fill them with your liquid to the brim, and then you seal them with UV resin, which does cure in the presence of water. So you can fill your core, seal it, and then you can put it within the dice. And because you essentially get a core that is the exact dimensions for the inside of your dice, so that it sits perfectly and is evenly distributed.
Yeah.
And that's how you keep it liquid, is that its own little contained environment, basically.
Yeah.
And then you just encapsulate that in resin.
We had we were talking about some of the. I don't think we've got the making of one of the core liquid cores here, but we had some. Miles was kind enough to send over some photos of him in the workshop, which we can get to embarrass him about now. There he is.
Man, that is me.
So,
it is actually my old workshop now. I have in fact, the glass door that you can see behind there is my new one. I've upgraded.
Yeah, so you get bigger and better things already. So
Exactly.
what's the equipment that you need? Is there a lot of equipment required for a lot of this stuff to do?
Yeah, so the safety equipment's the big one. So you really shouldn't be working with resin unless you've got, for one, gloves, just nitrile gloves, and a mask. Ideally, a mask that is, you can just about see it in the corner there. It's a mask that's rated for organic vapors, because whilst all the resins say that they are safe and non-toxic and don't have volatile chemicals, they absolutely don't when they're in their separate parts. But when you mix them, they do.
Gotcha.
So I also have...
Have you ever had any kind of close calls? Any mistakes going on?
No. I haven't, because essentially before I start doing anything, I always get all my gear on. I also wear an apron, or sometimes I actually have an old hoodie, basically. So I don't actually work like that. I do. That's me posing for a shot, basically. I'm not actually pouring anything, because it's essentially, while I'm working with resin, it wouldn't be okay to have someone else there taking photos unless they also had safety gear.
Yeah.
So that is just me essentially holding an empty bottle there, and making it look like
I love that though. I love that. It's a little bit more behind the scenes, a little bit of movie magic.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's completely fake.
But it's because I wanted to show off, sort of what I'm doing. So
well,
I'm also
that's what I mean.
Get a little fume hood there as well, which extracts any vapors away.
We see a lot of yeah, I mean, we see a lot of video shorts and things like that on Instagram where people have just gone, okay, here's the dice, crack, crack, crack. I pop them out. Look how good they are. And it's like, well, now we know you've edited that, but how much have you not included? So what's all the safety gear? What's the equipment you've used? How much time has been involved? You didn't polish them or sand them down or anything. You just gone, crack, crack, crack. Here it is. Here's the gem. Here's the gorgeous thing. It's actually a lot of hard work, trial and error. Practice.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's like here I would have I wouldn't be wearing a shirt normally anyway, but just because it can get quite warm in all the sort of safety gear, I normally wear like a long sleeved hoodie and an apron as well when I'm working, just because the last thing you want is to get resin on yourself. When you're working with, you shouldn't, but in the occasion that it did happen, it's one of those things that it might not do anything to begin with, but over time you can build something called resin sensitivity. So it could get to the point that you just can't work with it anymore. And, you know, for me, who I'm trying to make a career dice making now, I'm full time. So that would be devastating if I couldn't work with it.
Yes, yeah. We've got oh, go ahead.
No, it's all right. I was just going to continue.
There's another question come in. This is from Undead Corpse. Sorry if this has already been asked before, but is there a favourite colour that you like to use for your dice?
Yes.
I can bring up the slide as well if you want.
Turquoise.
Ooh.
I absolutely love that sort of turquoise teal space between blue and green. It's absolutely my favourite colour. I don't have any pictures here of them.
I was going to go for that
at the minute, but it's there's just something about that colour that just really does it for me.
I'll ask the flip side question: Is there a colour you actually detest using?
That's a hard one. I don't do a lot with red, and it's not because I hate it. But it can be quite a hard colour to find a red that still maintains that vibrancy.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
That there's something about. I mean, purple is kind of similar, but I found a really good purple. A few good purples that I use, but red it can very easily look dull, or it can burn inside the resin.
Yeah,
right.
And end up going a bit browny, which it just kind of loses its luster.
Yeah, yeah.
So bring it. Oh, go on, Steve.
I was going to ask. So back when we started playing, you know, most of the dice you got was at the comic shop, and they were Chessex sets.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So they have the rounded edges.
Yeah.
And I notice a lot of the dice now are what I would call casino style. So they're the sharp edged D6s and sharp edged and the rest of the dice. How much of that comes from the mold versus how much are you sanding into it? Do you have to spend a lot of time sanding that in, or is it coming straight out the mold with that sharp edge, crisp finish on it?
It's largely coming out of the mold. So I make. So I 3D print the masters with sharp edges. I normally have a little bumper around the edges just in case any supports sort of chip little bits off or something when I'm pulling the supports off, for anyone that's done 3D printing before. And I sand basically that bumper away. And then so once my master dice are sanded and polished to a glass finish with those sharp edges on them, and then everything in every mold made from that is essentially a duplicate, like a carbon copy of that shape.
So how long does a mold last for? How many sets do you get out of it?
That really varies on the silicon, and sometimes the silicon batch as well, even if I'm using the same one. But I would say between 15 and 20 sets.
Okay.
Normally, out of a single mold before it starts to perish. I can sometimes push it further, but then it requires more sanding. It requires more sanding and polishing on the other end, basically.
Yeah.
We've got another question for Undead Corpse. He seems to like the answer there. How long from start to finish does making a whole set of dice take? Now you're not doing them in sets of 7, are you? You're doing them in, here's a whole creation of D6s, here's 7s, 8s, and 9s, or are they in sets of 7?
It really depends. So for example, like I do sell single D6s, so I have some molds that are just full of, there's like 5 or 6 D6s in a single mold. So like all my shard shaped D6s, I have some molds for them, and then I also have a full molds with full polyhedral sets that are just 7 dice.
Gotcha.
And I prefer to do it like that. Other people do it differently, and it very much is just what works for you. There's no real right way to do it. But in terms of finishing those from start to finish, it's about 2 weeks. And there's like 3 hours of hands-on time sort of throughout that 2 weeks, basically.
Okay.
And toughest part, that's absolutely sanding and polishing. It probably takes 2 out of those 3 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just put like something on the telly, and then you're just polishing, or do you have to?
Yeah. No,
be aware of what you're doing.
I stick something on YouTube, listen to some music, or watch an actual play, something like that. And some days I'm really not in the zone for doing it.
That's why you need to hire someone else to do that bit. Yeah, I don't like doing that. But,
other days I'll sit down and just do it. I'll just sit and do a few sets in a day and just bash them out. Really, that's the sort of only way to describe it.
So do you do them entirely by hand, just changing the grade?
Yeah. So it's a little bit. So I go through sort of 3 steps of sanding, down to I think the way I've got it working now, I go down to about 15 micron,
right?
On polishing papers, and then I actually use car headlight polish, and a Dremel and a cotton pad to do the to basically get the shine on at the end.
And you do all of that by hand, apart from the Dremel bit. So you haven't got a little jeweler's wheel set up or anything like that.
No. I mean, I still sit there with a Dremel and go on each face and buff it to oblivion.
That must be the satisfying phase of it, though, when you really get a shine on it.
Yeah. No, it definitely is, and it takes a lot of practice, actually.
Have you done something? Go, that's mine. that's too good to sell. That's mine.
So, I'm actually, I like to think of myself as really good in that respect.
Yeah.
I don't keep many of my own dice, because if I did make things that I wanted to keep, I'd have a serious problem.
We all use dice. Everyone's got a problem.
I have plenty of dice. I have a couple of a couple of them that I go, I love this. If I've tried like a new technique or something, then I'll keep something. But otherwise, I try and detach myself from it, because it would be a very dangerous game if I were making dice for myself all the time.
That's what we want to see. Is like we mentioned, UK Games Expo, Dragon Meet's coming in December, and they all have gaming tables where you can go along, you book a table, or you could just turn up and someone's got an empty slot. You play D&D, you play Pathfinder, you play Alien, play all manner of games. But to rock up with your own dice, and people go, oh, where'd you get those from? I made them. Here's my card. Or to sit there and go, they're rolling my dice. Because that's the kind of the level you want to get to, where you actually step away from the stand for a few hours, give yourself a break and go, wow, look, that person is using my dice in a game that I'm playing in. That, I think, would be an amazing feeling, just to kind of get your dice out there. And I know we said before, the TTRPG projects that you're now being involved in, to again a bigger market where your artisan dice are going to be involved in, where people can add them on and be like, yes, here's the dice for that game. Here's the only way to get it is through this channel. I love the whole idea of that. Just for everybody listening, we've got about 5 minutes before we wrap up. For those of you joining us live, if you have questions, do shout out. We will be ending this soon. So any questions, get me now. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you very much. If you have questions, or if you haven't answered it correctly enough, Put them in the comments below. That's what they're there for. And I'll send them over to Miles and we can get these answers to you. Now, I wanted to bring up another picture because we talked about the various things here. Here we go. Take us through, again, we've talked about the process here. We have a few slides just to kind of wrap up on. You've done some, when you go to your Instagram account, you've done some ASMR videos where it's this paint thing and you crack it open and you're using like masking tape to pull off all the excess. What's the cleanup process? Because that looks quite not straightforward. Like there's probably still a lot of work. And you mentioned polishing and sanding. What other steps are included in this?
I mean that is kind of that really. So basically, when I do the molds, you end up with what you can see on the screen now, and then the lid. So I pull the lid off, and then there's a very, very thin layer of hard resin, essentially, that's sort of that's got trapped between. It's almost like paper, but when you crack it and do that, it kind of just helps free everything up, really. But it's a great sound.
In my head, it is a nice sound actually. In my head, these are just ice cube trays.
They are,
and you're just
trays, yes.
They kind of are.
Yeah.
They really kind of are. And then I mean, in most cases, it just peels away when I do that, and then I'm just left with the face of the dice. And then occasionally you might have some slight blemishes and stuff around that top face, and it's just a case of sanding and polishing them out. Really, they're normally so tiny that it's fine.
And this one here, we've got so many colors in here. Again, it's trial and error. But there's no real way of knowing, apart from pink at sort of one point, yellow and green at one point. There's no real way of knowing how that's going to come out, how it's going to sit inside.
So I kind of can to some extent.
Okay.
I can and I can't. So I can't predict the exact way the colours will mix, but I know because of like leaving the resin a certain amount of time, and then I place each individual colour with a cocktail stick essentially, sequentially round. And depending how long I leave it, I can kind of control how much they mix, how far down they go. And the further down they go, the more likely they are to mix certain colours, like yellows and purples, for example, are heavier pigments. So I know they will travel further. So if I add them last, they'll pull other colours down with them. If I add them first, they'll remain purer, and things like that. So it's controlled chaos, I suppose.
It's funny you mentioned like toothpicks of using that. So this is completely off topic, but my boy, he's 8 years old, and we've watched Sonic the Movie 2. Now in that, the bad guy, the henchman to the bad guy, he makes him a coffee, and he uses toothpicks to paint the picture of his boss's face, and it just reminds me of that. That could you do something so controlled without dropping color in on one side of that dice where you could potentially have something?
I mean, not yet, we'll say, is the answer. But I might have to give something a try.
I think it's possible. I think anything has to be possible.
I think it's possible, yeah. And so that is the other side of the dice that you just show coming out the mold, basically.
I mean,
you said a minute ago, you if you kept everything you made, you'd have a real problem. Do you know, what did you do with the first set you ever made?
I kept it.
You kept it.
Yeah. So I have those, and they are nothing like what I can make now. And looking back, they are they're bad. Is the bottom line of it, That I mean, they're fine, but it's just like anything. the more you try stuff and experiment and practice, the better you get.
How many sets do you think you've made?
Oh God, I don't know, but hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I started doing this as a hobby in 2019,
Right.
and I've been a company now for a year and a half ish. So a lot, yeah.
And I was going to say that you got some gold flakes in there or something in the dice, but actually,
Yeah.
look behind the dice. Is that sanding or is that polishing?
Yeah. So those are the polishing papers that I use. So if you want to check out like my Instagram and stuff, or in fact the Cthulhu Dreamt Kickstarter that I'm part of has a video of me polishing the master dice for them,
Nice.
going through the whole process like sped up, which you can check out. I think it's on my Twitter as well, if we still call it that. But yeah, so I go through all the stages of polishing, so you can see a couple of them there. And then I get to the third one, and then I start doing, going over it with the Dremel.
Nice. We got again, just as we start to wrap up, people, it's runefable.com, and we did have one final question come in.
Yeah.
It's a slightly bigger question. It got two parts. Let's have a look. So we got Undead Corpse again. Do you have a favorite class? You're assuming that Miles plays D&D or Pathfinder. Do you play D&D and Pathfinder?
I do.
Cool.
And I don't have a favorite class, but I love arcane spellcasters.
Yes.
Give me a wizard, a sorcerer, a warlock, a magus, and I probably say anything that combines swordplay and magic is like my sweet spot.
I have a white dragonborn Eldritch Knight that I play in. There's a bunch of YouTubers from the States, and I play in that game.
Ah, cool.
And it's really it's quite fun actually. But yeah, playing an Eldritch Knight, which is basically a Jedi.
Yeah.
So I have full plate mail, dragonborn, shield, sword. I can summon it, and I can do some magic. That's great. I'm a tank. I love playing that.
Sorcerer and Warlock for me. I'm not a fan of the wizard. I like the flexibility of the sorcerer and the warlocks.
Yeah, no, I must admit the newer sorcerer for D&D, and then the magus for Pathfinder are both kind of that spot where they can just like they have their magic and then they can just do cool stuff with it that no one else can, and that really appeals to me.
We have Miles also sent over a few tiny little videos. We'll just put those up on screen now so you can see. That one, let's grab it. I'll rewind. There we go. So how long does it take to, I mean, a 20-sided dice? You have to do every single side individually. You can't put a cloth around it. You got to put it down, turn it, do another one, turn it.
Yeah, again, that depends on how fresh the molds are. The fresher the molds, I might only have, like, if it's a brand new mold, I might only have to do the top face and just give it a really sort of fine finish on it, just to tidy up the mold lines. An older one, I'll have to do every face.
Yeah. I mean, it's again really nice. And we have another one here of catching the light. Let's wait for that. Let's see if it is it going to work. There we go. And that's what I meant before about you can see because it's semi-translucent. That light is going straight through and it's picking up all these tiny little details in there.
Yeah, so
it really shows the edges, doesn't it, as well?
It does, and some of the clearer ones that aren't as sort of colourful, they actually do still refract the light, and you get a little prism effect on the inside faces, and that's really cool.
That's really nice. Now, we are going to wrap it up there, folks. Thank you very much for your questions. Just one last thing. You can actually find him at various conventions around the UK. What you got lined? There he is. What have you got lined up next? We've got Dragon Meet in December. Have you got anything between now and then?
I actually don't. This time, I've just been at Tabletop Scotland, and Dragon Meet is the next one for me at the Novotel in Hammersmith.
Yeah, Hammersmith here. Well, we're also based in London. Saturday, the 2nd of December. It's the first week, and not only is it well placed, so travel is really easy. And if you're driving in, you can park at Novotel Hotel. Is that how you say it? Novotel Hotel?
I've never known.
Yeah,
I think it's just the Novotel.
Novotel. But the perfect time to get those Christmas presents, stocking fillers, that kind of thing. And especially dice. So if you have a dice player in your family, friend, people at work, here's a great opportunity to get them some custom artisan dice, which are going to look fantastic. Secret Santa dice, yes. Do you have anything on your what kind of stuff can people find on your? I mean, there's a great example of it here.
Yeah.
But what can people expect to find?
So I've got sort of full sets of dice. I have giant D20s. You know, if you have those really big rolls and you want to throw it out in front of the players, for example, for everyone to see.
I do that a lot now.
Yeah, it's great fun. It's absolutely great fun. I've got single D6s, mystery D6s, single dice, and then the Bowl of Misadventure, which are all my seconds from the hand making process as well, which some people like to just paint up as they are, and some people like to make jewelry and stuff out of them.
Ah,
cool, good. Right, there we have it there, folks. That is the end. But as I said earlier, if you do have any further questions, do leave it in. Well, for those of you watching on YouTube, do let us know in the comments below, and I'll send the questions over to Miles. Again, find Miles at the website is runefable.com. Check out the Instagram and also Dragon Meet. Go to Dragon Meet, get dragonmeet.com. Book your tickets now, because we'll all be there. So Miles, if you're there, or when you're there, if you're up for it, we'll do. We talked about this before we went live, but if you're up for doing it, we'll do a quick kind of 3-minute video live while we're there.
Yeah,
just for a bit of fun. I mean, the sound is going to be far better at Dragon Meet anyway. We're going to do some silly things, but if you're available to tear yourself away for a few minutes, I'd love to buy you a cup of tea and a biscuit, because that's what we do.
That'd be lovely.
Cool, fantastic. Right, until next time, everybody. I'll see you again soon. Bye.